few times already. Happy Father's Day to all of you. It's good to see you today. That's my beautiful Father's Day graphic that we created. But yeah, good to have you here this morning. One of the things that's always interesting to me is we go all out typically for Mother's Day. And then on Father's Day, it's like, man, yeah, dads, whatever. And I kind of want to change that today. It's interesting that even as you look at the church calendar, Mother's Day is one of the highest Sundays of the year, right? And there's lots of energy and a lot of people come out. And then Father's Day, it's like, all the dads like fishing on a lake somewhere? Or what is going on? I mean, it's like every year, right? Every single year. And so Kristen and I were in a planning meeting on Wednesday, and we're talking through Acts chapter 14 and everything we're going to go, direction we're going to go in the service. And it dawned on me on Thursday, I'm like, I called an audible on Mother's Day, and we went away from Acts, and we just focused on the moms. I think what I'm going to do, and I'm sorry, by the way, because we lay this stuff out, and then sometimes I make changes. But I said, I'm going to go with more of a Father's Day type of message. And so over the last few days, I've been just sort of thinking through what could I share to the dads that are here today, and honestly, to all of the men in general. So if you're a man right now, I want you to say, hey! Yeah! I was going to say hoorah, but that's a little more military, right? Maybe yo, what's up? But we're going to talk about men today. Now, ladies, let me just say this right now. Don't check out. Don't mentally just think, okay, then why am I here? Because how many women are married? Just raise your hand if you are married. Okay, so that means you have a husband. And I'm about to share some principles of what it means to be a man and a father, a godly one. And so you're going to want to take notes. Because, see, your husband is going to fail in a few of these areas, and then you're going to go, hey, do you remember on June 18th, 2017, that principle about leading courageously and accepting responsibility? And you remember some of that? So take notes. Or some of you are single moms, and you don't necessarily have a man in your life here, but you're raising a couple men, future men, boys, teenagers, and you need to take some notes so that you can instill in their lives what it means to be a godly man as they get older as well. Then you've got a group of people that are looking for a man right now, and you're like, there's got to be a man out there for me. I know there is. So you're going to want to take notes, because this is the type of man you need to go after. And then some of you have said, you know what, I don't need a man in my life. I'm fine who I am, and I'm living like this for a long time. Well, that's great as a single woman, and yet you probably have other men you can encourage. So this is for everybody, all right? This is not just for the men. I have 4 girls. Fatherhood is difficult. I think we all could agree with that. And what you do with one child, you think you're parenting perfectly, and then you have another one. And nothing you tried with the first one works on the second. And then you experiment with the second, and God gives you a third. And you think, okay, I'm going to get it right with number 3. And they're totally different too. And then number 4, and they're totally different. And some of you said, John, you just need to stop having kids. That would probably solve your problems. But it's hard. And we try things as dads and as fathers, and we fail time and time again. We mess up. I think of the story of the one dad. He had his little son, 3-year-old Sammy. Sammy is kind of getting ready for bed. Dad prays with Sammy. That's good. Okay, shuts the door. Good night. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, he starts to hear some whimpering in the room. And so he comes back in, and he puts his ear to the door, and the whimpering starts to turn to crying, and the crying starts to turn almost hysterical and screaming. And Dad comes in the room. Sammy, what's the matter? Sammy, are you okay? And Sammy says, Dad, I think I'm going to die. Little 3-year-old. Why? What happened? He said, I swallowed a penny, and I think I'm going to die. And Dad says, oh, son, no, you're not going to die. It's okay, everything will work out in the end. It'll be fine. But Sammy just kept crying and crying and crying like, no, I don't know, Dad. And he couldn't calm him down. So like a good father would do, he starts to think, what can I do? And he goes, I got an idea. And he kind of palms a penny, and he goes up to his ear, and he goes, oh, wait, Sammy, I just got the penny. It came out of your stomach into my hand. And the little boy was like, you did? Wow, Dad, that was cool. And he grabs a penny and swallows it and says, do it again. We try as dads to mix it up and do stuff and try things, and it doesn't always work out with our kids. Sometimes it blows up in our face. And you know, our society is such that they're not giving dads a break. Dads get a bad rap. Men get a bad rap in today's society. I'm convinced of that. 20, 30 years ago, if you turn on a television, you would see family sitcoms. You would see dads portrayed as loving, perhaps joyful, kind-hearted. You'd see shows like, this is way back in the day, but I wrote a few down. The Waltons, Leave It to Beaver, Family Ties, Cosby Show, Full House, even Full House. Why are these three men living together? This seems strange, and yet it's always a joy-filled, good moral at the end, and the kids hug dad, and you're kind of left with this warm fuzzy, right? Not so anymore. And I don't know when it shifted, but at some point, I don't know, I think Married with Children, somewhere around that point, and Simpsons and Family Guy and everything else, everything started to wash over mainstream media, portraying dads as what? Slobs, lazy, irresponsible, don't take responsibility, don't do things right, maybe abusive, hard-hearted, and so on. Now, a lot of it is maybe justified. I wonder sometimes how much of Hollywood is a projection onto our culture and how much of it mirrors what actually goes on in culture. But when you start to look at the statistics, I won't put them all on the board. I did a little Google search this weekend. I got a little depressed because we have definitely a rising rate of, and I won't go through everything, you know it, rising rate of divorce, a lot of absent fathers, a lot of fathers being incarcerated, a lot of fathers that are struggling with addiction, high level of premarital sex and babies born out of wedlock, and on and on and on it goes. And even when you look at different ethnic communities, white, Anglo, African American, Hispanic, you start to see rates and you go, man, what is going on in our society? Where are all the good men? Where have all the good men gone? And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about what it means to be a man. What does it mean to be a man? I'm not talking the biology of it. I'm saying, what does it mean to be a godly man in today's society? And I want to leave you with a definition by the end of the morning that'll give you some sort of hooks to say, okay, these are things I need to be thinking about as a man. What does it mean to be a man? Who do we need to look to get a good definition of manhood? You know, I'm a big basketball fan. So is LeBron James, is he kind of the epitome of a man, athletic, big, strong, competitive? Is it like James Bond? Is that more what a man is supposed to be like, kind of sneaky and good with the gun and good with the ladies and, all that kind of thing? Like the most interesting man in the world, is he kind of the, epitome of a man? I mean, what would it look like if God were to just say, let me show you, you know what, I'm just going to become a man, and then I'll show all of you exactly what a man looks like. Like, what if God were to just do that? Wouldn't that be nice? If God just said, guys, I'm just going to become a man, and I'll walk around on the earth for about 30-some years, and I'll show you what it means to be a man. Wouldn't it be nice if God would do something like that? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, yeah, he did. And his name was Jesus. And for a lot of men, for some reason, there's a disconnect when you think about Jesus walking on the earth for 30 years. I don't know if we have this overly divinized view of Jesus, but Jesus was a man. He had the same drives and impulses. He hungered, he thirsted, he was a man, all right, like we are. Sometimes we have a view of Jesus, and I've said this before, that he walks in slow motion. And he has nice flowing brown hair, and he always wears the same white robe, and he talks very softly. And he's a little effeminate, to be honest with you. He's got blue eyes and nice flowing hair, and he's got nice conditioner he puts in his hair. And he's always very mild-mannered. Where did we get this image? Jesus was a Jew. He's the son of a carpenter. He worked with his hands. He built stuff. He was a guy that people wanted to follow. Rough fishermen wanted to follow him. They saw Jesus and they saw a man. They saw a rabbi. They saw someone they wanted to follow and give their life to. Jesus led men. He led crowds of people. He knew what it was like to experience suffering. He endured it. He pushed through it. Yeah, he got angry sometimes, and he drove people out of the temple, and other times he would kneel down beside a woman and gently speak to her. He understood what it meant to lift up women. He understood what it meant to help the brokenhearted. He knew what it meant to stand up to the authorities. Jesus was the man that we need to start to look at if we want to know what it means to be a man. And what's interesting in Scripture is there is a comparison in the New Testament that is really runs throughout. And the comparison is between Jesus, who is what every man should aspire to be, and then this other man by the name of Adam. And throughout Scripture, you see this comparison between Adam and Jesus, the first man and the second man. This Adam and what's sometimes called the last Adam, Jesus, Adam and Jesus. And in every one of us, there's this struggle between Adam and Jesus. Let me read for you Romans 5:17. Check this out. Paul is writing, and he says basically, let me show you what Adam did, and then let me show you now what Jesus has done as the man. If by the trespass of the one man, Adam, death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and the gift of righteousness reign in the life through the one man, Jesus Christ? Let's keep going. Consequently, just as one trespass, that'd be Adam, resulted in condemnation for all people, so one righteous act in Jesus resulted in justification for all people. For just as through the disobedience of the one man, Adam, the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of the one man, Jesus, the many will be made righteous. So through one man, Adam, death and sin, disease, toil when we work, curses, all that stuff was poured out on men. But through Jesus, the ultimate man, we see restoration and life and grace and righteousness poured out. We give you another one. 1 Corinthians 15:45-49. So it's written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural. And after that, the spiritual. The first man, Adam, was of the dust of the earth. The second man, Jesus, is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, so we shall bear the image of the heavenly man. Let me just say it this way, men in the room. You bear the marks of two men, Adam and Jesus. And you walk in the shadow of two men, the shadow of Adam and the shadow of Jesus. And when you operate in lust and pride and greed and self-centeredness and you try to be the man and you do all that kind of thing, you're walking in the shadow of Adam, the first man. But when you walk in selflessness and peace and joy and sacrifice and you live that way, now you're walking in the shadow of the man that you should aspire to be, the man Jesus. In Jesus, we find authentic manhood. And so I want to walk through a very simple definition. It's actually a description of a man that I believe will resonate, hopefully, with you. And this is a definition I just want to give kind of credit where credit is due. For an organization, and actually, when I was in my early 20s, I walked through a series called Men's Fraternity. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's an older thing. They've come out with a sort of a revised version. And when I heard this definition, and this description, and then heard it again and again through a few other seminars I was in on becoming an authentic man, it just resonated with me. I think this is something we need to really aspire to be as men. And so let me start off and read it for you. It goes like this. There's 4 hooks to it, so to speak. Reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and invest eternally. As men, we should reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and then invest eternally. I like that. And I want to walk through each one just very briefly, one at a time, and then we can go from there. Let's talk about rejecting passivity. You go back to the Garden of Eden and we look at the first man, Adam. And Eve is over here, and Eve is about ready to, bite into the apple or whatever the fruit is that you want to describe, and she's about to eat the fruit. And where is Adam at? Where is Adam? Adam is passively hanging out, kind of over here, just in the shadows, while Eve is right out front, about ready to disobey God. Where is Adam at? Well, he's passive. He's letting life just happen. He's letting things just kind of take place. He's not stepping up. He's not taking a leadership role. He is passively in the shadows. And so, men, I would say this. Why are you standing in the shadows and passively waiting as life goes by and your kids grow up? And why is it that your wife always goes to the PTA meetings? And why is it that at night, when it's time to put the kids to bed, you're found in a chair watching TV and relaxing when someone else is doing the dirty work? Why is there this impulse in us as men sometimes to be passive when it comes to the home or the work or the mission of Christ and let life just happen? Reject that passivity. I mean, Jesus clearly rejected passivity. I'm going to compare the two at every point. I mean, he wasn't passive. He didn't let things happen. He had a plan. He had a mission to make disciples, to go to the cross, to die, to rise again, to equip his people to ascend to the Father. He rejected passivity. Here's the second one. Accept responsibility. We're responsible for some stuff as men. We're responsible for a few things that God has given us that we need to own up to and we need to accept. And so what does that look like for you? Well, there's 3 different things I came up with. I didn't put it on the screen. God has given you some commands. He's given you a will to obey. Adam wasn't just thrown into the garden and said, hey, figure it out, all right? No, he was given commands. I want you to tend to the garden. I want you to steward it well. I want you to name the animals. I want you to oversee creation. I want you to work it. I want you to... So, a certain will to obey. The second thing God gave man was a work to do, a purpose, something that Adam needed to physically do. Guys, we have been given a vocation, a calling, something God has said, this is the work that I want you to do. So accept the responsibility and do it until I call you to do something else. And then the third thing God gave Adam was a woman to love. And so when he created Eve and presented Eve to Adam, what he said to Adam, the first man, is, hey, this is the woman that I want you to invest your life into and love her. So he gave Adam a will to obey, he gave him a work to do and a woman to love, and unfortunately, we know the story. Adam struggled with each. But Jesus, on the other hand, accepted responsibility. Let me read a few things for you. He obeyed the Father's will. John 4:34. My food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. He did the work God called him to do. John 17:4. I brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me. And finally, he gave Jesus a woman to love, and he loved her. I know that sounds scandalous as I get ready to say it, but listen to Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And so in each case, Jesus accepted responsibility and did what he was supposed to do. And I want to just say this to the men. God is speaking to you all the time. And you have a will that you need to obey his voice. He's given you a vocation, a job. You may not like it. You may be sitting in it right now today going, man, I feel like this is a dead-end job. I'm having a hard time getting up in the morning to go to work. But you know what? That's the vocation. That's the calling you have right now. You have a work to do. Don't aspire to free time and retirement. Like, find your calling, your vocation, and do it. You have a work to do, and then you have a woman to love, someone in your life. And if it's not your wife, then by all means, love the people of God the way Christ loved the church. Accepting responsibility means that when you create a child, you now have a responsibility to provide and disciple and care for and love that child. And when you go to work in the morning, you have a responsibility to do the best job you can do. Accept that. Number 3, lead courageously. Lead courageously. We know Adam failed to lead in the garden, but we also kind of wonder if Adam even led his children very well, Cain and Abel. Why wasn't Adam watching out for Cain and Abel? And why wasn't he noticing that the two of them were having friction? Why wasn't he bringing those kids together and saying, hey, Cain, man, I see some jealousy rising up in you. You need to talk to your brother. We need to work this out. Family meeting, guys. Let's bring everybody together. Eve, Cain, Abel, come together, guys, as things aren't working out. No, he let it go so far that Cain killed his brother. He did not lead courageously. He was passive. He didn't take on the responsibility. I love this quote. It's by a great theologian named John Wayne. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. I really like that. Lead courageously. Yeah, but John, I mean, I don't know. I don't really... spiritually speaking, I don't feel like I know enough to lead. I don't hear from God the way I need to, and I'm not sure. My wife is doing a great job, and my kids seem to be fairly well developed and connected into society, and I'm just going to be passive. No. Lead courageously. Women, will you all just put your fingers in your ears for just a minute, everybody? Do you know why your wife always seems to grab the bull by the horns and lead? Because you're not. I mean, I have this feeling in my heart, and my wife and I have talked about this before when we've come across some difficult decisions, is she wants me to lead. And I'll say, well, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? And at some point in the conversation, when we get going through a tough decision, I don't know, what do you think? Deep down, what she's saying to me is, I want you to hear from God, and I want you to lead. And I will do what God calls me to do, and yes, we share in those decisions and everything else. But guys, we've got to lead courageously. You might be scared to death at that next journey in life and the next chapter and what it means, but man, you need to listen to God and just lead your family well, courageously. Don't put that burden of leadership on your wife. Does that mean women can't lead? Oh, John, you're sexist. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that God has called men to lead courageously, and we need to do that. And we need to invest, finally, eternally. Invest eternally. One life. You got one shot. You've got one opportunity. Your kids are getting older. You're starting to get into your 50s, maybe into your 60s. I saw a quote, and again, with all the fake news going around on the internet, I don't even know if it's legitimate or not, but let's just say it is, by Steve Jobs before he died. And essentially what he was saying as he was on his deathbed is, I've got all the money, and I've got all of the fame, and I've got all the glory, but when I'm lying in a hospital and I see green lights flickering and my body is wasting away, what do I really have? And he was lamenting. He was lamenting so much of his life. Investing eternally means, what are the things that matter beyond this life? You guys know Matthew 6, right? Don't store up for yourself treasures on heaven or on earth where moth and rust destroy. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I love this, and again, I've heard this quote so many times, but I pulled it out. Jim Elliot, great missionary, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And you know what matters at the end of your life? Here's what matters, right? It's your family. It's the people you invested in. It's the lives that you changed. It's the faithfulness you portrayed before God. It's the life that rejects the passivity and takes responsibility for what God has given you, leads courageously, and then invests eternally. And you know what? I don't care if your kids become great athletes. I don't care if your kids are super popular. But I do pray your kids love Jesus. And that stinks that your kids are going through a hard time right now, but you know what? What's the most important thing? It's the eternal stuff. So let's invest eternally and say, okay, how, son, daughter, wife, husband, whoever, how can we use this to form us into the image of God and be more like Jesus? And invest eternally in your kids. Disciple your kids. And so here's a kind of concluding thought, and I like this definition, as I've said earlier, but when you think about your life, ask yourself, am I passive? Do I pawn off responsibility on other people? Am I leading my family or my wife or the people God has given me right now? And am I investing in things that matter for all of eternity? I think if you can answer these 4 statements in the positive and say, yeah, I'm doing those 4 things, then I'm here to tell you, man, it's not about James Bond and LeBron James and all the different men we might aspire to be. It is about doing these 4 things and imaging our life after Jesus. Because you know what? If God were to create a man as a prototype to give us a sort of a glimpse of what a real man ought to look like, that person is Jesus. He's already done it. And so I want to ask all of the men in the room to do me a favor, if you would. And this is not just for the dads. This is for every man in the room. I'm going to invite our worship team back up. I want all of you to just stand for a moment. So men, just stand on up. You are in the shadow today, men, of one of 2 men in Scripture, Adam or Jesus. And some of you have lived your life, living most of your life in the shadow of Adam, living for yourself. trying to aspire to stuff that's all self-driven and self-motivated, not accepting the responsibility you need to have, maybe being a little overly passive, not leading courageously or investing in eternal things, and the shadow of Adam is heavy on you. You wrestle with that. For some of you, you've tried to live life in the shadow of Jesus and be more like Christ in everything you do, everything you say. I just want to encourage you guys today to live your life according to these 4 principles and with Jesus Christ as your emblem, master, prototype of what a godly man ought to be. And I'll do the same because I know I need it too. And I know there's times in my life when I get passive and I pawn off responsibility and I stop leading courageously, and then I start investing in things that don't matter on this side of eternity. And when those things happen, I've got to call myself back. What did Jesus do? How did he live? And so with these men standing, I'm going to ask the rest of you now to stand. And if you're next to someone, just put a hand on his shoulder, or if you don't want to do that, just quietly pray for the person that you're standing next to, all right? And let me pray for you that God would make you more like his son, more like Jesus. And we would walk out of here this Father's Day committed to being these kind of men, okay?
We just want to thank you for watching the sermon online. If God is working in your heart, we would love to hear about it. You can go online, www.encountertrinity.com/nextstepscard. You can fill out information there. Let us know what God is doing in your heart. If you need help with anything, we would love to help. Counseling, we would love to do anything that we can to help you go to that next level.